It was the sound of the front door slamming shut that did it. It wasn't a dramatic fight, no shouting, no big confrontation. Just the sound of the door closing behind her as she walked out. And I realized, in that moment, I had never really known her at all. I watched the clock tick by in the silent house. The house I had spent years filling with memories, pieces of a life I had thought was mine. Yet here I was, sitting on the couch, the same couch where we used to laugh, the same couch where I once felt like everything was right. But now it felt hollow. She had been planning this trip for months. A girl's getaway, she said, to unwind, to recharge. I should have known better. I should have recognized the signs. But I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to face what was happening. I told myself it was normal. Everyone needs time for themselves, right? It wasn't just the trip that bothered me. It was the way she had prepared for it, the way she had become so distant in the weeks leading up to it. The texts late at night, her phone constantly out of sight, her sudden obsession with going out with the girls. It wasn't the kind of behavior I had once known in her, the woman who was always so open, always so transparent. Now, there was just this wall between us. But when she left for that trip, I knew it wasn't just a vacation. It was more than that. It was her escape. I wasn't naive enough to think it was only about a few days of fun with friends. I realized that, while she was packing her bags, I had packed my own bags too, metaphorically. I had been packing up the pieces of myself I had been losing for months, trying to hold on to something that wasn't even there anymore. I decided I wasn't going to stay. Not this time. I don't know when it happened exactly, but somewhere along the way, I had stopped being the man she loved. I had become the man she tolerated, the one she ignored, the one she pushed aside. The moment I realized that, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at all the years I had wasted. That first night, after she had left, I sat alone in the house. It was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that fills your ears and makes your mind race. I wanted to call her, to ask what was going on, to beg for the truth. But I didn't. I didn't want to be the desperate one. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much I cared. Instead, I did something else. I went through her things. I had never done that before, never snooped. But something was different now. Something inside me was telling me that this was the moment. If I was going to understand what had happened, I needed to see it for myself. It didn't take long. I found what I was looking for in the corner of her drawer. A set of plane tickets. Not to the girls' trip, but to somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't supposed to know about. And then, there were the hotel reservations. They weren't for any group retreat. No, these were for a single room. A room with a name I didn't recognize. My heart sank. The room started spinning. I tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe I was overreacting, but the pieces were coming together in a way that I couldn't ignore. She wasn't just recharging. She wasn't just taking a break. She was seeing someone else. I had never imagined myself in this position. I had always thought I'd be the one to leave, the one to walk away when things went wrong. But this was different. I was the one left behind, the one who had been in the dark, the one who had been pretending everything was fine while she made plans with someone else. By the time I finished looking through everything, my hands were shaking. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just numb. I didn't want to confront her. I didn't want to beg for the truth. But the truth had already been laid out in front of me, in black and white. She had been lying. It was then that I realized I had a choice. I didn't have to sit here waiting for her to come home, to pretend that everything was normal. I didn't have to accept being treated this way. I didn't owe her an explanation or an apology. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I started packing. It was almost like a reflex. Something inside me just clicked, and I began collecting my things. I wasn't going to stick around. Not for her, not for anyone. I wasn't going to be the man who waited for the other person to change. I was done. When she came back, I would be gone. She would have no idea what had hit her. She would return to find the house empty, to find the life we had built together reduced to nothing but memories. And maybe, just maybe, she would understand what it meant to be left behind. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be the one left in the dark anymore. It was time for her to see what it felt like to lose everything. And when she did, maybe, just maybe, she'd understand why I had to walk away. I can still remember the way my shoes sounded on the hardwood floor that night, each step echoing in the silence as I moved through the house. The clock on the wall ticked louder than ever, like it was counting down to something I didn't yet fully understand. There's something eerie about being in a house that used to feel like home, only to realize it's just an empty shell now. I went to the kitchen, stood in front of the fridge, and stared at it for a while. It was a strange feeling, knowing that nothing was as it seemed. The pictures of us hanging on the walls, the dinner parties we used to host, the holidays we spent together, none of it mattered anymore. I opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water, but I wasn't thirsty. I needed clarity, and all I could hear was the thumping of my heart in my ears. She was supposed to come back the next day, but something inside me knew that I wasn't going to wait for her anymore. I had spent so many years apologizing for things that weren't my fault, and I had begged her, over and over again, to come back to me. But this time I was going to leave. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from the version of myself that had let this happen. I went upstairs to the bedroom, the one we shared. Our bed, where I used to fall asleep next to her every night, was now just a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I stood at the foot of the bed, looking at the empty side where she used to sleep. I used to think about the future when I looked at that space, but now all I could think about was how empty it felt. My hands moved on their own, grabbing things, throwing them into the suitcase. A few shirts, a pair of jeans, toiletries, nothing special, nothing extravagant. I wasn't trying to run away. I was just trying to escape the lies. I wasn't going to pack the memories of our life together because those memories were hers, not mine. I didn't need them to carry with me anymore. As I packed, I kept telling myself that this was the right thing to do, that this was the only way forward. I wasn't the kind of man who would just let someone walk all over me, who would let someone stay and break him down piece by piece. And yet, for so long, that's exactly what I had been. I had allowed her to dismiss me, to pull away, and I had kept forgiving her because I thought love meant taking it all. But no more. I had learned the hard way that love didn't mean allowing someone to tear you apart. It meant respecting yourself enough to walk away when you realized you were worth more than being second place. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was her. A text message. For a second, I hesitated. I could have ignored it, but I was curious. Maybe I still wanted answers, even though I knew deep down I wasn't going to get them from her. I unlocked my phone, and the message appeared. Hey, babe, everything's good here. I miss you. I'll be back tomorrow. I stared at the message for a long time. It felt like she was speaking directly to the version of me who was still naive enough to believe in everything she said. The version of me who thought maybe, just maybe, we could get back to the way things were. But I wasn't that man anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I locked the phone and threw it on the bed. It was so easy for her to send a message, to pretend that everything was fine. But nothing was fine. It hadn't been for months. I knew that, and I wasn't going to let myself be tricked into believing otherwise again. I took the last of my things, walked to the door, and stopped. The house felt suffocating, and I was suffocating in it. The house that had once been filled with laughter, with love, now felt like a cage. I had outgrown it, and I had outgrown her. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and felt the cool night air on my skin. The silence outside was comforting. There were no words to be said. No more pretending. No more wondering what could have been. I was free, but I also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. I didn't know where I would go. I didn't need to know. I didn't need a plan. I just needed space. The kind of space that would let me breathe again. The kind of space that would allow me to figure out who I was without her. The next morning, I knew she would come back to an empty house. No apology, no explanation, just the cold reality that I had finally walked away. She would be angry. She would be confused. But more than anything, she would have to face the truth. I wasn't the man who had stayed. I wasn't the man who had begged for her to change. I was the man who had finally left. By the time I reached the highway, the weight in my chest had started to lift. I didn't know where I was headed, but it didn't matter. I just had to keep driving. As the miles passed, I thought about how I'd arrived at this point, how easily I had been led into complacency. It wasn't that I hadn't seen the signs, I had. The late nights, the hollow apologies, the fake smiles. But I had convinced myself that things would get better. I convinced myself that I could change, that I could fix everything. And for what? So that I could sit in a silent house, staring at the empty side of the bed and wondering when she was going to tell me the truth? I glanced at the empty seat next to me and realized I hadn't thought this far ahead. There was no plan. No one I could turn to. I wasn't even sure what I was doing, except escaping. And that felt good. The cool wind through the cracked window, the buzz of the road beneath me, and the sound of my own thoughts for the first time in forever. It was a strange sense of freedom, a kind of peace that I hadn't realized I needed until now. Eventually, I pulled into a small motel. Nothing fancy, just a place to rest. I didn't need much. A bed, a shower, some time to clear my mind. The front desk clerk barely looked up as I checked in, just handed me the key and told me breakfast would be served at 8. I didn't care about breakfast. I didn't care about anything except being alone, away from everything that had tied me down. The next morning, as I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window, I thought about her again. Elise. What would she think when she came home and found nothing? No explanation, no fight, no closure. Just an empty house, with the echoes of a life we used to share, now silenced. Would she even care? Or was I just another thing she'd leave behind, like all the others? I grabbed my phone and checked the messages again. She hadn't texted me, hadn't called. The silence felt deafening, like I was waiting for a storm that might never come. I almost wanted her to reach out, to apologize, to say that she made a mistake. But I knew better. I knew that she wouldn't. Elise had never apologized for anything in her life, not when it mattered. And that was another reason why I was here, alone in a small motel room, miles away from everything I used to know. As the hours dragged on, I found myself thinking about the future. What now? Where did I go from here? I had no idea, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I didn't need her. I didn't need anyone. I could start over, rebuild from the ground up. The world was so much bigger than the tiny little life I had built with her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had options. I felt like I had a choice in my own life. By afternoon, I decided I needed a change of scenery. I couldn't sit here all day, waiting for her to ruin the little peace I had found. I packed up my things, walked out of the motel, and got back on the road. There was nothing keeping me in this place, nothing tethering me to the past. Elise had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The world outside was endless, full of possibilities I had been blind to for so long. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I was sure I was going to find it. I just needed to keep moving forward, away from the life I'd left behind. The life where I was second, where I was the one who begged, the one who waited. That wasn't who I was anymore. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The next few days were a blur of new places, unfamiliar faces, and restless nights. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I kept moving, hoping that eventually I'd find what I was looking for. Peace, maybe. Or maybe just a new direction. But no matter where I went, there was one thing that kept nagging at me. Elise. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, but I knew she would. She had to. There was no way she would let me disappear without trying to track me down. And when she did, I had no idea how I would respond. What would I say when she asked why I left? Would I tell her the truth? That I couldn't stay another second in a marriage built on lies? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to be the man who got walked all over. I wasn't going to let her decide my fate anymore. I was taking back control, one step at a time. It was only a matter of time before she realized I was gone. And when she did, I was sure she'd try to fix things. She'd try to convince me that it was all a mistake, that I was overreacting. But I had learned the hard way that some things can't be fixed, and some people can't be trusted. As I kept driving, I realized that leaving wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of mine. The story of a man who walked away from everything he thought he wanted and started over, no looking back. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to feel what it was like to lose everything. Days bled into one another as I wandered through towns I didn't care to remember, lost in the endless blur of unfamiliar faces and nameless streets. The further I went, the clearer it became. I wasn't just running from her. I was running from myself. From the man I had become, the one who stayed silent when he should have screamed, the one who accepted the crumbs she tossed his way because he was too afraid to walk away. The hotel rooms were all the same, stale, impersonal. I didn't feel comfort in them. I just felt numb. As the world continued to move around me, I found solace in my own isolation. No one knew who I was here. I could be anyone. I could be nothing. I hadn't spoken to Elise since that night I left, and a strange kind of peace settled over me every time I reminded myself that I hadn't looked back. I hadn't sent a single message or email. I hadn't answered any calls. I didn't care what she had to say. I knew that whatever words she had for me weren't going to fix what was broken. But then, one evening, the silence was broken. My phone buzzed on the bed next to me. I picked it up, hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the screen. A text. From her. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't like you. I'm coming home tomorrow. We need to talk. I stared at it for what felt like hours, letting the words sink in. Of course she'd want to talk. Of course she'd want to fix things. That's who she was. She never saw the damage she left in her wake. She never saw that she was the one who had broken us. In her world, I was just supposed to keep waiting, keep hoping that things would go back to normal. But normal was a lie. Our life together had become a string of lies, and she was too blind to see it. I set the phone down, suddenly feeling a pang in my chest. It wasn't because I missed her. It wasn't because I longed for the relationship we once had. It was something deeper, something I had buried under years of neglect. A question I had never dared ask myself until now. Was I enough? For the first time since I left, I felt the weight of that question. Was I enough for myself? Was I enough to not let her walk all over me? I thought about all the years we spent together, all the sacrifices I made. I thought about how she'd smile and tell me everything was fine, all while her heart drifted farther away from me. I had been invisible to her for so long, but I had allowed it to happen. Now, there was no going back. The day she was set to return, I did something I had never done before. I drove back to the house. Not because I wanted to confront her, not because I wanted to hear her explanations, but because I needed to see for myself. I needed to stand in the place where we had built our lives and feel that it was finally time to say goodbye, for good. The house looked the same as it always had. Nothing had changed. The driveway, the flower bed she used to fuss over, the old swing set in the backyard where we used to spend afternoons together. Everything was frozen in time, stuck in the past. I stood outside for a few minutes, just staring at it. All the memories, all the pain, all the moments we had shared were tangled up in that house. It was hard to breathe as I thought about how much of my life I had poured into this place, into her, and how little of it had ever been returned. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to see her walk through that door, expecting me to be the same man who had been content with being neglected, with being left behind. But I knew she would be there soon, and when she walked in, she would find that I wasn't the same man anymore. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to fight for something that was already lost. I wasn't going to beg her to see me, to care about me. I wasn't going to be the one who stayed just to fill the empty spaces of her life. No, this was the moment where I took my power back. The power I had given up so easily, for far too long. And when she pulled into the driveway, there would be no tears from me, no pleading. She'd see me standing there, ready to walk away, ready to leave everything behind, just as I had done that night. I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the waiting. Done with the empty promises. She wouldn't understand it at first. She'd try to talk, try to make sense of why I had left, why I wasn't willing to wait for things to get better. But deep down, I knew she already understood. She understood better than anyone. The truth had always been there. I had just finally found the courage to see it. As she opened the door, ready to step inside, I turned away. Without looking back, I started walking toward the car. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going back to that life. Not to her, not to the person I used to be. I was taking my future into my own hands. And for the first time, I was walking away with my head held high, ready to reclaim the parts of me I had forgotten along the way. The door closed behind me, and that was the last time I would ever look back. As I drove farther down the road, my heart beat a little faster with every mile. I couldn't shake the image of her walking through that door, of her face when she realized I wasn't there. I knew she'd try to convince me that I was overreacting, that this whole thing was just a bump in the road, that we could get back to the way things were. But I wasn't going to let her do that. I wasn't going to fall into that trap again. I had seen it all before. The empty promises, the excuses, the apologies that came too late to mean anything. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but at that moment, I didn't need to. I just needed to get away from the life I had built with her, the life that had crumbled beneath the weight of her lies. I wasn't going to let her walk back into my life like nothing had changed. No, this was my time now. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I'd been dreading for so long. And as much as it hurt to admit it, I knew I was better off without her. I just had to make it through the next few days, and then I'd be free. The sun had set by the time I reached a small town on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just a quiet place where no one knew me, where no one cared about the broken man who walked through the door of the local diner. The waitress barely looked up as she handed me a cup of coffee. I didn't need to talk to anyone. I didn't need to tell my story. I just needed to sit in silence, to breathe for the first time in weeks, months, maybe even years. As I sat there, sipping the lukewarm coffee, I couldn't help but think about the life I'd left behind. I wondered what she was doing right now. If she was already unpacking her bags, if she was texting him again, the man who had stolen her heart while I was still sitting there, thinking everything was fine. I had been a fool, hadn't I? She never loved me the way I loved her. She never saw me the way I saw her. And that was something I would have to live with. The truth is, I had been living in the shadow of someone else's dreams. Her dreams, her ambitions, her desires had taken center stage for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to have my own. I had forgotten what it was like to feel important, to feel needed. And that was on me. I let it happen, but not anymore. I couldn't change the past, and I wasn't going to waste my time dwelling on it. What was the point? What good would it do me to go back to the past, to try and fix something that had been broken beyond repair? No, I needed to move forward. I needed to find a new purpose, a new direction. And I wasn't going to let her or anyone else define that for me. The next few days were a blur. I spent them in motels, moving from one place to the next, never staying in any one town for too long. I kept telling myself that I was running towards something, but deep down, I knew I was just running away. Running away from the pain, from the disappointment, from the fear that I would never find my way out of this mess I had created. But as the days passed, I started to feel something else. A sense of freedom. A sense that maybe, just maybe, I was doing the right thing. I had always been the one to stay, the one to try to fix things, to hold on to something that was slipping through my fingers. But now, I was the one walking away. And that felt powerful. By the time I reached the next town, I had finally made up my mind. I wasn't going back to her. I wasn't going back to the life I had built with her. I was going to make my own life. I didn't know what it would look like yet, but I knew it was going to be different. I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future. I wasn't going to let her dictate my happiness. I picked up my phone, the one thing that had connected me to her world, to the world I was leaving behind, and I sent her a simple message. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. I'm not coming back. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hit send, put the phone down, and stared out the window of the motel room, letting the silence settle around me. It was done. I was done. The truth is, I didn't need her anymore. Not the way I thought I did. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to choose me. I wasn't going to be the one she ignored until she remembered I was there. I wasn't going to beg for love, for attention, for respect. I had spent too many years doing that. This was my time, my freedom. And as much as it hurt to walk away from everything I had known, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I was finally in control of my own life, my own destiny. And when she saw that message, when she read those words, she would know. She would know that I was gone for good. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the wake-up call she needed to realize that sometimes, it's too late to fix what's already been broken. Days had passed since I sent that message. In the silence, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had expected a response, but nothing came. Elise never reached out. And at first, that left me uneasy, a gnawing feeling deep in my chest, a kind of void I couldn't quite explain. Was I wrong to leave without a fight? Should I have given her a chance to explain herself? But as each hour passed without a word from her, I began to realize something. I wasn't looking for an explanation. I wasn't searching for closure. I was finally seeing things for what they were. And what they were was a lie. A long, drawn-out, slow-burning lie I had allowed myself to be a part of. The truth hit me hard, like a slap in the face I had been too blind to notice. All those years I had spent convincing myself that things would change, that I could be better, that if I just loved her enough, everything would fall into place. I had been a fool. I had forgotten who I was in the process, buried myself in someone else's world, trying to keep the peace. But the peace was a lie, and I had been pretending for far too long. The worst part? The worst part was that I had known all along. From the way she avoided eye contact, to the constant late nights, to the way she would leave the house in the middle of the night and come back hours later, I had ignored it. I had made excuses for her. I told myself that it was just stress, that it was work, that it was life. Anything but the truth. The truth I had refused to see. She had been seeing someone else. She had already moved on. And I had been holding on to a ghost, a version of her that had long since disappeared. But now, as I sat alone in a dingy motel room, I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was just numb. And strangely, that numbness was freeing. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to hide behind the veil of hope that things would somehow work out. I had given her everything, and now it was time to take it all back. I spent the next few days in the same restless state, hopping from town to town, never staying in one place for too long. I didn't want to make any connections. I didn't want to belong anywhere. The road was all I had left, and it was the only thing I could rely on. In the quiet of my mind, I started planning. Not a grand plan, not some big revelation, but just enough to move forward. I wasn't going back to the house. I wasn't going to put myself in that position again. No more false promises, no more empty words. I was leaving that part of my life behind. But then, on the fifth night, as I sat at a small cafe in a town I barely remembered the name of, my phone buzzed. My heart skipped a beat. I thought it was a mistake, but when I checked it, I saw her name. I don't know what you think happened, but I need to talk. Please, just let me explain. I stared at the screen. Her words were cold, calculated, like she had rehearsed them over and over in her head. She didn't sound desperate. She didn't sound regretful. She just sounded frustrated. Frustrated that I had walked away without giving her the chance to explain. But there was nothing she could say that would change what had happened. There was nothing she could say that would make me go back. Not anymore. I didn't reply immediately. I sat there, sipping my coffee, feeling the weight of the decision I had made. It was too late for explanations. It was too late for us. All the years of waiting, all the years of trying, and for what? For her to leave me behind for someone else? For her to pretend everything was fine while she built a new life without me? I wasn't her second choice. I wasn't going to be anyone's fallback plan. I took a deep breath and typed back. The words felt foreign as they left my fingertips. There's nothing to talk about anymore. I'm done. And you know why? I pressed send before I could change my mind, before the part of me that still cared could convince me to reconsider. There would be no more chances, no more, maybe next time. This was the end, and I was closing the door on it for good. The response came almost immediately. You're being dramatic. You can't just walk away from this. Dramatic? She thought I was being dramatic? I had spent years living in a nightmare I refused to wake up from. And now, when I finally did, she called me dramatic? I put the phone down and took a long sip of my coffee, trying to push the anger down. There was nothing left for me in her world. Nothing. The silence was back again, but this time, it wasn't oppressive. It wasn't a reminder of the emptiness I felt when I was with her. It was freedom. I was no longer trapped in the lie we had built together. And even though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing. I was never going back. It's strange how silence works in moments like this. At first, it's deafening, overwhelming, like a storm about to break. You expect it to crush you under its weight, to suffocate you with the quiet. But then it shifts. And when it does, you realize it's not silence at all. It's clarity. It's the kind of clarity you can only get when you stop pretending that everything is okay. When you finally take off the mask and look at the truth, raw and unfiltered. I had been running for days. From her. From everything. But it wasn't until I sat alone in that motel room, staring at the phone I'd left behind, that I understood what I was running from. I wasn't running from her. I was running from myself. I was running from the man I had allowed myself to become. The man who begged, who waited, who let himself be nothing more than a placeholder in someone else's life. I had let her take everything from me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. But in the silence of that room, I realized something else. I could take it all back. I could rebuild, piece by piece, until I was whole again. The message I had sent her, the one that felt so final, had settled in my mind, and I started to feel the weight of it. Elise had always been a master at manipulation, at making me feel like I was the problem. She would call me dramatic, accuse me of overthinking, as if her actions didn't matter, as if everything I felt didn't matter. But I was done. I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her world. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story we'd written together. I had already started my own. The next day, I packed my things again. I didn't want to stay in the town where everything had gone wrong. I didn't want to linger in places that reminded me of her. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove without thinking about where I was going. The road was open, stretching out in front of me like a promise. A promise of something new. A promise that I wasn't tied down by the past, by the mistakes I had made, by the choices I had let her make for me. I was driving toward freedom, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a scary thing. It felt like the only thing. I drove through the night, heading further away from the life I had known, but still, her presence lingered in my mind. There were moments when I thought about what she would say when she saw me again. Would she beg me to come back? Would she act like nothing had happened, like she hadn't been seeing someone else, like I hadn't caught her in lie after lie? It didn't matter anymore. Nothing she could say would change what I knew. I stopped for gas in a small town near the border, the kind of place you pass through without ever really noticing. As I pumped the gas, I noticed an old man sitting on the bench by the store, staring out at nothing. He had that look about him, the kind of look that comes from years of living, years of watching things go by, too many stories left untold. He caught my eye as I walked back to the car. "Life's funny, isn't it?" he said, his voice gravelly, like he hadn't used it in a while. I stopped, nodded. "Yeah, it is." He smiled, a slow, sad smile. "You ever think you're just waiting for something? Waiting for the moment when it all makes sense?" I didn't know why, but I found myself stopping. Maybe it was the loneliness in his voice, or maybe it was because I felt like he understood something I didn't. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, trying to find some kind of wisdom in his weathered face. "Sometimes," I finally said, "it feels like I'm waiting for someone else to make sense of it all. Waiting for them to tell me what to do, how to feel, what to think. But I'm learning that maybe it's time to stop waiting." The old man nodded, like he had expected that answer. "You can't let someone else be the reason you're stuck," he said. "Not ever. It's your life. You're the one who's got to steer it, even if the road's rough." His words hung in the air as I got into the car, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if they were meant for me or for him. But they stayed with me. The idea that it was my life, that I had the power to change my own direction, to stop waiting for someone else to decide my fate. I drove off, the old man's words echoing in my mind. I was finally taking control. I was done waiting, done letting her dictate how my life would go. She had her chance to decide, and she had chosen someone else. Now it was my turn. It was time to find out who I was without her, to carve out my own future, no strings attached. The road stretched out ahead of me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I felt like I was finally going somewhere. A place where I could be myself again. A place where I could breathe. As the hours passed and the miles piled up, I started to realize that maybe Elise would never understand what I had done. Maybe she would always think of me as the man who walked away, who didn't fight for her. But what she didn't know, what she would never know, was that I wasn't walking away from her. I was walking toward myself, toward the person I had forgotten I was. And that was something no one, not even her, could take away from me. The phone buzzed again as I crossed into a new state. Another text from her, but this time, I didn't bother to look. It was too late. I had already made my decision. The life we had built was over, and I wasn't going to be the one to keep rebuilding it. I hit ignore and turned up the radio. There was nothing left to say. The weeks that followed felt like a slow unraveling of everything I had known. At first, I was consumed by the silence, the absence of her, the absence of the life we had shared. I expected it to hurt more, but it didn't. It felt more like shedding an old skin, a weight lifting off my shoulders with every passing day. I continued my travels, not with the same aimless wanderlust I had felt at the start, but with a newfound purpose. I took a job at a small cafe in a town I had never heard of before, a place that wasn't on any map I had planned to follow. I began meeting new people, learning new things about myself and the world around me. There were moments of doubt, of course. I still thought about her, still wondered if I had done the right thing. But those moments passed, replaced by something far more important: peace. I started to rebuild my life from scratch, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took up hobbies I had abandoned, went for walks by the river, and learned how to cook meals that didn't come from a microwave. It wasn't extravagant, but it was real. It was mine. And then, one morning, I woke up to a text. It was from my sister, asking how I was doing. She had always been the one to reach out when I was too quiet, too distant. She knew me better than anyone, and I hadn't realized how much I needed that connection until I saw her message. We talked for a while, catching up on life, on everything that had changed. She asked about Elise, but I told her the truth. I had moved on. I had made peace with everything. That afternoon, I found myself sitting on the porch of my little apartment, sipping coffee and watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time in a long time, I felt content. No, not content. Fulfilled. It was the kind of happiness that came from knowing you had done the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. The kind of happiness that didn't depend on anyone else. And just as I started to relax into this new chapter, I got another message. This time, it was from her. I know I've messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I think about you. And I miss the person you used to be. I wish I had realized sooner how much you meant to me. I read it twice, letting the words settle in. She wasn't asking for me back. She wasn't pleading. She was just honest. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't been able to see before. Elise had her own journey to go through, her own lessons to learn. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I sat there for a long time, thinking about how far I had come. I had spent so long trying to make her see me, trying to convince her that I was worth her time. But now, I was finally seeing myself for who I truly was. The man who didn't need her to define him. The man who was enough, all on his own. I took a deep breath and typed a short response. I hope you find what you're looking for, Elise. But I found mine. I'm okay now. And so are you. I hit send, and as the message went through, I felt the last of the weight I had been carrying slip away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I was free. And in that freedom, I saw the future for the first time in years, a future where I didn't need to explain myself to anyone, where I didn't have to settle for less than I deserved. It wasn't a future filled with big plans or grand dreams. It was just a simple life, one that was mine. I stood up, stretched my arms out, and looked out at the world ahead of me. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I didn't need to search for happiness anymore. It was already here, within me, in the life I was creating, one small, brave step at a time. And as I walked into that future, I did so knowing that I had finally, truly, let go.